Have you ever come home from a long trip only to find that everything was stolen without a single lock broken? No doors kicked in, no shattered windows, just the sound of strangers laughing, barbecue smoke drifting through the air, and a woman with an official-looking badge telling you you're the trespasser. That day, I didn't just lose control of my own home. I nearly lost the final piece of my grandmother's legacy, and I had to learn how to fight back against a threat not from criminals, but from someone wearing the mask of authority. I came back 3 days early. My business trip to San Jose wrapped up ahead of schedule. The client delayed contract signing due to internal issues, so I figured why not return to the only place I actually call home, the little lakeside cabin at Silver Pine Lake, Oregon. My grandma Emily had spent over 40 years caring for that property. After she passed 8 months ago, the cabin became my retreat, a place to breathe, disconnected from everything loud and artificial. No strong Wi-Fi, no traffic, just the sound of water against the shore and wind brushing through the pines. But that day, peace was already dead. I remember the moment clearly. When I turned down the narrow dirt road leading to our private lane, I knew something was off. At least 40 cars were parked along the shoreline. SUVs, pickup trucks, colorful sedans lined up across the grass, blocking access to the dock. And then came the music. Not birds or water like I was used to, but thumping bass pounding from oversized Bluetooth speakers. The smell of grilled meat filled the air, carried on waves of laughter and applause coming from what looked like a makeshift stage on my backyard deck. I stepped out of my car like someone walking into a dream that had soured. The crowd was almost entirely strangers. Men flipping burgers on the same grill my grandmother once used to cook salmon on Sunday nights. Kids running through the lavender bushes I'd replanted last month. Some woman was rocking in Grandma Emily's old chair, sipping wine and laughing, while others were rearranging her ceramic garden gnomes as if they were party props. My heartbeat went sharp and heavy. I stormed across the grass, too angry to feel the earth beneath my feet, and that's when I met Claudia Monroe. She stood in the center of the chaos like a wedding coordinator, white button-up shirt tucked into dark jeans, auburn curls framing her confident face. A badge pinned to her chest read, Silver Pine HOA Community Board Member. Her beige apron was embroidered with Claudia's community events. She looked at me like I was a confused guest who'd taken a wrong turn. "Oh, hi there," she said brightly. "Here for the community gathering?" I tried to stay calm, but my voice cracked. "This is my house. My grandmother left it to me. My name's Ethan Walker. You're all trespassing on private property." Her smile didn't even twitch. Claudia looked at me like a teacher correcting a child's math error. "I totally understand emotional attachment," she said smoothly. "But this property has unpaid HOA fees dating back 4 months. As such, it falls under the emergency community use designation per code 18B. I have the paperwork if you'd like to see it." She pulled out laminated documents with official-looking seals and a signature I didn't recognize. Dorothy Hale, president of Silver Pine HO. I'd never heard of her. In fact, I didn't know there even was an HOA. Silver Pine had always been private property, not part of any planned community or regulated development. "I've never received a single hobo," I said. "This is not a communal space. This land's been in my family since 1971. Claudia raised her eyebrows, then pulled out her phone. Right there in front of everyone, she dialed emergency services. "Hi. Yes, we have a disruptive individual at an authorized community event," she said calmly. "He's making claims of ownership and appears emotionally unstable. Yes, the address is..." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. 15 minutes later, Officer Martinez pulled up. He took a quick loop around the yard grills, smoking, music playing, smiling families. Claudia stood calm and collected with a badge and a clipboard. I stood red-faced and shaking, gripping my deed and inheritance papers like a lifeline. After a short private chat with Claudia, the officer turned to me and said, "Mr. Walker, this appears to be a civil matter, not a criminal one. I'd recommend going through proper legal channels. In the meantime, I'd advise you to leave before things escalate." In my own house, I was being asked to leave. The woman who raised me, whose presence still lingered in the wood of that porch, and the pages of the books inside was being erased. And I, her heir, had become a ghost haunting a stranger's celebration. Claudia walked me back to my car. As we reached the driveway, she leaned in and whispered with ice in her voice, "Smart men know when they're outmatched, Ethan." I have connections and legal backing you can't imagine. Walk away. At that moment, I didn't know what hurt more, being forced out of my home or realizing that no one saw the theft happening in broad daylight. I drove to a cheap motel 12 miles from the lake. The room smelled like mildew and old cigarettes. I sat there in the flickering yellow lamplight, watching the shadows on the wall and wondering if this was real, if a stranger could just declare your property community space and get away with it. Then came the text. Check Clackamas County tax records. She knows something you don't. A concerned neighbor. That's when I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a war. I'd never seen my hands shake just from opening a website. But that night, in a damp motel room filled with the dull hum of a dying AC unit, my fingers hovered over the keyboard, heavy with dread. When the Clackamas County property records page finally loaded, a bold red banner flashed across the screen like a slap to the face. Tax lien filed. HOA delinquent balance. Toli man. 7. Alien. I couldn't believe it. I had never received a single HOA bill. Every piece of mail addressed to Grandma Emily had been forwarded to my apartment in Portland. Not once had I seen the words, Silver Pine HOA. And now, staring at this line of text, I felt my stomach knot. Then I saw the date. Tax lien filed. March 6th. It hit me like a punch to the ribs. That was the exact day Grandma's obituary had appeared in the local paper. I remembered it vividly. I was still at the funeral, standing next to her framed photo wearing that cream cardigan and turquoise brooch, her silver hair curled just so, smiling softly like she was still whispering, "Don't worry, sweetheart, everything will be okay." And while I laid flowers on her grave, someone filed a lien on her property claiming unpaid HOA fees. How did they know she died before I was even back from the cemetery? I opened more tabs. I searched Silver Pine HOA on Google. Nothing legitimate. No government registry, no official .org site linked to city records. But one result popped up at the top. silverpinehoinfo.org. The website looked polished. A pine tree logo, stock photos of fall leaves over calm waters, a mission statement about revitalizing community engagement. There was even an event calendar listing BBQs, yoga sessions, boating classes, all located at properties I recognized around the lake. I scrolled to the bottom. Domain registered to Claudia Monroe. IP address traced to Beaverton, Oregon. This wasn't anonymous. This linked straight back to her home address. And at that moment, I didn't feel anger. Not yet. I just felt loss. That cabin wasn't just a structure. It was where my entire childhood had taken root. I learned to ride a bike on the dirt path behind the cabin. Every summer morning, Grandma would wake before me and knock 3 times on the old wooden window frame her signal that breakfast was ready. Scrambled eggs, toast with butter, and a glass of orange juice always garnished with sliced strawberries. I remembered a September afternoon when she taught me how to recognize the call of the long-tailed grackle and whispered, "If you learn to listen to nature, you'll never truly be alone." That cabin, that rocking chair, the black and white photo of my grandfather on the wall, the half-finished knitting project on the couch, they were now just props in a con woman's performance. I called Lena my girlfriend, the one I planned to propose to next month in that very garden where Grandma taught me the names of wildflowers. "Someone threw a barbecue on my deck," I said, claiming HOA rights. With fake paperwork, I was kicked out of my own house. She didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then her voice turned low and clear. "Where are you?" "At a motel 12 miles out." I don't know what to. "Don't say anything else. I'm getting in the car. I'm staying with you tonight." 3 hours later, she knocked on the door with a small backpack and fire in her eyes. Lena, with her background in branding and marketing, had a sixth sense for forgeries and fabrications. More than anyone, she understood what that cabin meant to me. "We're going to expose this," she said, "starting with the things they can't fake, the truth." That night, we worked side by side, me digging through old emails and property files, Lena analyzing document layouts and metadata. We combed through public real estate filings, archived newsletters, and HOA registration databases. Then she froze. "Ethan," she said, tapping the screen, "Silver Pine HOA was registered exactly 5 months ago. That's after your grandmother passed." I stared at the date. Then, My eyes drifted to the name on the documents, Dorothy Hale. She doesn't exist, Lena added, already running a background check. Not in city records, not in voter databases, not even in newspaper mentions. It's a ghost signature. I exhaled like surfacing from deep underwater. We weren't dealing with opportunism. We were dealing with a fabricated legal framework built around an emotional void. The next morning, we drove around Silver Pine Lake, checking each dock and backyard. What we saw confirmed every suspicion. At Derek Moore's dock, flyers advertised weekend paddleboard classes, $40 per person. At Harper Kane's garden, a weathered sign read, Mindful Healing Yoga, Community Sanctuary. At a third property, kids' art stations and makeshift craft tents were abandoned like a ghost town after a fair. All private properties, all used without consent. When we returned to the motel, I didn't go inside right away. I stood outside, beneath a burnt orange sky, staring toward the lake in the distance. The water sat still, as if unaware that the ground around it was being stolen inch by inch. I thought of Grandma again. The way she used to hold my face in her palms when I was little and say, "The world isn't always fair, darling, but people who stay kind, who stay true, won't be swept away." I clenched my fists. She taught me to stand up. And now someone was desecrating the last piece of her memory, using it to run a scam built on fake rules and fabricated authority. If Claudia Monroe thought she could hijack my grandmother's legacy and turn it into a lakeside scam, she'd chosen the wrong man to mess with. If one person alone couldn't fight back against a counterfeit system wrapped in the language of legality, then I would no longer be alone. And the first person to stand with me was Lena. The next morning, she sat cross-legged on the motel bed, laptop balanced on her thighs. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtain, lighting up half her face, and in her eyes I saw not just anger, but the focus of someone who'd lived too long in a world built on lies. "This isn't random con artistry," she said. "Claudia has structure, strategy, and a clear objective, to create a fake ecosystem of power." That phrase echoed in my mind. A fake ecosystem. What we needed now were real people, real witnesses, real evidence to tear apart the illusion Claudia had crafted. I started by returning to the cabin, not by walking in, but by watching from a distance through binoculars. The sight twisted something inside me. Claudia was giving a tour to a middle-aged couple, guiding them through my grandmother's garden. She pointed at the rose trellis that Grandma, Emily, and I planted when I was 17 and said, "This is our emotional wellness area, perfect for family milestone events." I gripped the binoculars until my knuckles turned white. That same day, Lena and I drove to Maple Hill, the small town just beyond Silver Pine Lake, where most locals got their groceries, gas, and coffee. Lena laid out a simple plan. We need to find the people Claudia's touched. They're silent not because they trust her, but because they think no one else is willing to stand up. The cafe Beans and Birch became our headquarters. I left a flyer on the corkboard near the counter that read, "Have you been pressured to use your property for community events? You're not alone. Meet us at 5 p.m. today, table number 7. I didn't expect anyone to come, but at 5:02 p.m., a silver-haired woman in her 62nd, upright posture but watchful eyes, pulled out a chair across from me. "My name's Harper Kane," she said evenly. "Claudia once called me a psychological obstruction when I refused to let her yoga group use my backyard. A week later, I got a letter citing me for disrupting community harmony, and my face showed up in the HOA newsletter. I stared at her. Harper placed a clear folder on the table in front of me. Inside were photos of Claudia's yoga event flyers, a printed email threat, and a video from Harper's home security camera. In the footage, Claudia and an unknown man were seen measuring and jotting down notes outside Harper's property. "They never knocked," Harper said. "They inspected my lock like they had every right." Chills rippled through me. Lena had already pulled out her phone to record the footage. "We're not letting this continue," I told her, firmer than I'd felt in weeks. "And we need you with us." Harper didn't hesitate. 2 days later, Derek Moore, a rugged man in his 50s who owned the dock at the south end of the lake, met us behind a gas station. "I got conned out of more than $600, he growled. "Claudia hosted a canoe workshop at my dock. She hired some guy to play instructor, collected payments on Venmo, then vanished. When I pushed back, she filed a complaint accusing me of noise pollution disrupting community meditation. He snorted and pulled up a video on his phone, Claudia, wearing yoga gear, addressing a circle of people on mats. Feel the water, the wind, the healing energy. Behind her was a banner, Silver Pine OA Wellness Division. Now we had 2 witnesses, 3 video proofs, and a mountain of righteous anger. And then came the most unexpected ally, Mrs. Peterson, who lived alone in the final cottage along the wooded ridge near my cabin. Harper introduced us. She's quiet, afraid to be noticed, Harper said. But I think she's seen more than anyone else. Mrs. Peterson welcomed us into her tightly curtained home, sitting across from me with a cup of tea, her hands trembling slightly, her voice dry like it hadn't been used in days. I saw her taking photos of your cabin, she whispered. 6 weeks ago. Thought she was a realtor. Then, I saw a man with tools near your front lock. My heart thudded against my ribs. Are you certain? I asked. I have a motion sensor camera by the window. I saved the clip. She pulled out a small USB stick. I was going to delete it, but something told me, don't. We left Mrs. Peterson's home near dusk. I held that USB like a key to a buried vault. This wasn't just about trespassing anymore. Claudia had been planning this before I even knew I was in a war. In the car, Lena turned to me, eyes blazing. Now, she said, we have a team. I nodded. And somewhere beneath the ache of grief and the sting of betrayal, a new feeling began to stir in me, hope. By the end of that week, we had more than just anger. We had a coalition. Lena, Harper, Derek, and Mrs. Peterson, we weren't just victims anymore. We were witnesses, investigators, quiet soldiers in a war no one else had realized was being fought behind picnic tables and potluck flyers. And we had a plan. Claudia had 2 major events scheduled that weekend at my cabin. According to flyers and social media posts we quietly monitored, she was hosting a Johnson family reunion on Saturday and a Miller retirement celebration on Sunday. Each family had been promised exclusive lakefront access, full setup, and a private venue experience. The total fees collected, according to payment screenshots we'd obtained, exceeded $2,700. She was monetizing grief. My grief. Grandma's chair, her dishes, her garden, all turned into assets for a fantasy. Claudia was selling like it was Airbnb for emotions. So we decided to let the show go on just long enough to pull the curtain. I spent Thursday installing new motion-sensitive cameras throughout the cabin perimeter, legally allowed since it was my property. Hidden in birdhouses, inside potted plants, even beneath the patio railing, they captured every corner of the deck and backyard. I synced the feeds to my laptop and backed them up to an encrypted cloud drive. Meanwhile, Lena coordinated with the others, gathering hard evidence into labeled folders, building a timeline of Claudia's activities, even designing a brief dossier on the fabricated Silver Pine HOA. She presented it like a lawyer preparing for court, except our courtroom would be a lawn full of strangers holding paper plates and sweet tea. Saturday arrived like the stillness before a storm. From the ridge above the cabin, I watched through my camera feeds as SUVs pulled in one by one. The Johnson family arrived first, setting up colorful streamers and folding tables in the yard. A few kids ran toward the lake, their parents too busy unloading food trays to notice the strangeness of the setup. Then Claudia appeared, clipboard in hand, voice bright, smile professional. Welcome to your special day, she greeted the Johnson matriarch with arms outstretched. She walked the family through each feature of the venue. This rocking chair belonged to the original community caretaker. These hand-painted gnomes represent harmony and seasonal blessings. The lakefront arbor was blessed during our spring equinox ceremony. Every word she said was a lie. Every object she referenced had a name, a memory, a fingerprint that wasn't hers. By 11 a.m., the Miller family arrived also in full celebratory mode, hauling a catering truck, photo booth props, and a banner that read, "Congratulations, Pop." Their confusion was immediate. "Excuse me," said one of the Miller organizers, blinking at the decorations already on the lawn. "We were told we had the whole space reserved." Claudia, ever the showwoman, didn't miss a beat. "Oh, not a problem at all," she chimed. "The Johnsons are providing the music backdrop. You're the centerpiece today. It's a beautiful fusion event." A few Johnson family members exchanged uneasy looks. The matriarch hesitated, clutching a bouquet of hydrangeas. The Millers looked equally bewildered. And then, the tipping point, someone knocked over a tub of barbecue sauce. It spilled across the deck, trailing between tables, soaking into linens, and pooling beneath the folding chairs. Kids screamed. Parents tried to clean up. And in the chaos, the carefully balanced illusion started to teeter. That's when we walked in. Lena beside me. Harper holding her evidence folder, Derek carrying printed screenshots, and Mrs. Peterson calm resolute, clutching her USB drive like it held a grenade. I stepped onto the deck and raised my voice loud enough to cut through the confusion. Everyone, my name is Ethan Walker, and this is my property. You've all been victims of fraud. The crowd froze. Some held paper plates mid-bite. Others looked between me and Claudia, unsure whether they were witnessing a meltdown or a performance piece. Claudia's smile cracked, but she recovered quickly. Don't listen to him, she said loudly, addressing both families. He's been harassing our events for weeks. We have documentation of erratic behavior. Documentation like this? Lena interrupted, pulling out a signed deed and showing it to the Johnsons. Mrs. Peterson stepped forward. I saw this woman copying keys and measuring door frames weeks ago. She told me it was for community records. I didn't know she was planning to steal the house. Harper unfolded photos of the fake flyers. Derek held up his phone, playing a video of Claudia leading yoga on his dock. This is my property, he said flatly. She never asked. The families began murmuring, then questioning. The Johnson grandmother stepped toward Claudia. We paid over $1,000 for this, she said, voice trembling. You told us this was your venue, that it had been cleared legally. The Miller retiree added, my grandkids flew in from 3 different states. You said this was your family's legacy. The betrayal was palpable. The air cracked with disbelief and outrage. Then Claudia made her final mistake. She ran. She turned on her heel, bolted across the deck, and slipped on the spilled barbecue sauce. Her feet shot out from under her like a cartoon. She skidded across the boards and slammed into a kiddie pool filled with melting ice and beer cans. She emerged, drenched, sticky, with cans stuck in her hair and sauce streaked down her face. Still, she screamed, I have rights. You people don't understand what I built. I created magic moments. That's when Officer Martinez arrived. The same cop who, days earlier, had told me it was a civil dispute. But this time, he didn't see one man and one HOA badge. He saw 2 families defrauded, 4 local witnesses, a pile of evidence, and a woman soaked in lies and condiments. Ma'am, he said calmly, pulling out handcuffs, you are under investigation for fraud, false documentation, and criminal trespassing. Claudia screamed all the way into the patrol car. And as they drove away, the Johnsons and Millers looked around at the wreckage of their parties and then looked at each other. Well, said the Johnson grandmother softly, we've got food, music, family. The Miller patriarch smiled. You thinking what I'm thinking? An hour later, 2 broken celebrations merged into one joyful mess. The kind Claudia could never fake. The irony wasn't lost on me. What Claudia had tried to fabricate with staged events, fake banners, and phony authority happened naturally once she was gone. The Johnsons and the Millers, 2 families who had arrived strangers with separate plans, decided to stay together. Instead of packing up and leaving with bitterness, they looked at the half-collapsed tents, the muddied streamers, the now infamous barbecue sauce, slick, and saw possibility. By 2 p.m., they were setting up a shared buffet line. Children from both families played tag on the lakefront. Someone brought out an acoustic guitar. And without any schedule, any agenda, or any clipboard, a real celebration took shape. I stood off to the side with Lena, Harper, Derek, and Mrs. Peterson, watching as people made space for one another, shared stories over grilled corn, and laughed under the Oregon sun. This, Lena said softly, is what Claudia never understood. You can't manufacture connection, you earn it. That day marked a turning point not just for my cabin, but for the lake. The police investigation moved fast. Once Officer Martinez had the evidence in hand videos, witness statements, payment records, and the infamous USB drive from Mrs. Peterson, Claudia was charged with multiple counts of fraud, trespassing, and falsification of legal documents. Her court-appointed lawyer reviewed the mountain of proof and didn't even try to argue. At the victim impact hearing, Harper spoke first. She made me feel like I was the problem for protecting my own yard, she said. I stopped inviting people over. I started doubting myself. Derek followed, his voice steady. She used my dock to teach fake classes. When I complained, she filed a noise violation that stayed on my record for months. I almost lost a promotion at work. Then the Johnson grandmother stood and clutched the podium with trembling hands. We saved for a year. I hadn't seen my grandchildren in person in over 2. Claudia stole more than money. She stole time we thought we were spending in joy. When it was my turn, I looked directly at Claudia, sitting stone-faced at the defendant's table. You didn't just trespass on land, I said. You trespassed on memory. On legacy. You turned a place where I fished with my grandmother into a commodity for strangers. But what you failed to understand is that this cabin isn't just wood and paint. It's who I am. And you don't get to steal that. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in county jail, full restitution of all stolen money, and a permanent ban from organizing or promoting any event services in the state of Oregon. But the real story wasn't what happened in court. It was what happened afterward. The people Claudia tried to divide through intimidation, manipulation, and fake rules started coming together. They reached out to one another, realizing they had all been isolated not by law, but by fear. It was Harper who proposed the idea of a real community event. Let's do it right this time, she said at one of our early coffee meetings. No scams, no fees, just neighbors being neighbors. We called it Silver Pine Lake Community Day. No one took charge. No one was paid. Everything was volunteered: food, music, cleanup. People brought their talents, their folding chairs, their kids, and their stories. We took turns hosting at different properties, rotating so no one household had to carry the weight alone. And somehow, it all worked. The first official community day brought out over 100 locals, some of whom had never met before despite living a stone's throw apart. There were potluck tables spanning 2 yards, a makeshift dock concert, and a slideshow of old photos from the early families who settled around the lake, curated by Mrs. Peterson herself. That day, I saw the cabin alive again, not haunted by grief or echoing with betrayal, but filled with joy. And Lena, she was right in the middle of it, camera in hand, capturing candid shots of laughing kids, shared meals, quiet moments on the dock. She launched her own photography business shortly after. True Frame Studios, dedicated to capturing real celebrations. No filters, no fake smiles, just truth. Her work started gaining traction across Oregon. People were hungry for authenticity in a world full of staged perfection. As for me, I found myself unexpectedly changed. Before all this, I was just a software engineer hiding out from the world. But the fight for the cabin had shown me something I hadn't known I had: voice, resilience, and a strange ability to lead. When Harper wanted to open a legitimate dock rental service, I helped her design the booking site. When Derek started offering certified canoe safety classes, I built him a digital waiver system. Mrs. Peterson became our de facto historian, curating a permanent community archive online. And as the months passed, word of our turnaround spread. A regional newsletter featured our story with the headline, "The Fake O That Built a Real Community." People from nearby towns started contacting us, not just to congratulate us, but to ask for help. Other communities had faced similar scams, power grabs disguised as civic organization. And so, with Lena's encouragement, I used my tech skills to build something new. ProPatch, a mobile app that allows property owners to track unauthorized activity, register community disputes, and access verified legal resources. Within 6 months, ProPatch had over 10,000 downloads across 3 states. We were even contacted by a law firm offering to partner for broader outreach. And still, every Sunday, we met our little coalition of survivors, now friends. Coffee, conversation, and laughter. One Sunday, as we sat on the cabin porch, Lena turned to me and smiled. "You're not the man I found crying in that motel room anymore," she said. "I hope not," I replied, then paused. "But I think Grandma would have liked the man I've become." She took my hand and nodded. She'd be proud. I looked out at the lake, the trees reflecting off the calm surface. The sounds of children playing, neighbors chatting, and wind rustling through the pines were all around me. Not fake, not curated, real. We had turned ashes into foundation, grief into celebration, and a scam into a story worth telling. For a while, it felt like peace had returned for good. The cabin had become a haven again, filled with warmth, weekend potlucks, and sunset guitar strumming on the porch swing. Lena and I were planning our wedding for the following spring, right there in Grandma Emily's garden, under the same wildflower arch I helped her build when I was 13. We'd repaired what Claudia had broken. More than that, we'd rebuilt something stronger. And then came the brochure. It was subtle at first, tucked beneath our front door, no note attached. A slick, professionally printed real estate flyer with a bold header. Prime lakefront property, motivated seller, turnkey event potential. There were high-resolution photos of the cabin, my cabin, taken from angles that suggested someone had been scoping it. Close, deliberate, precise. The images showed the back deck, the herb garden, even the rocking chair that once belonged to Grandma. But what chilled me was this. The photos had been taken recently. The lawn still bore signs of our last community gathering. A string of lights I'd put up for Lena's birthday was visible in one of the shots. And yet, there was no company logo, no contact number. Just a whispering message printed in fine italics at the bottom. Silent sells. Opportunity never knocks twice. I turned the brochure over. Blank. Lena found me standing motionless in the foyer, flyer in hand. Her voice was low. "Ethan, where did you get that?" I didn't answer. I was already scanning the windows, then opening the door to look for tracks, footprints, tire marks, anything. But the ground was dry, undisturbed. Whoever left it had done so carefully. I checked the porch camera. Nothing. Whoever had been there either knew the blind spots or had disabled it. Lena and I sat in silence for several minutes. She reached across the table and gently pulled the flyer toward her, eyes narrowing as she examined the print texture. "This isn't amateur," she said. "This was printed on high-gloss premium stock, the kind used by luxury agencies. Which makes it even weirder, why no branding?" That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I called Officer Martinez. He listened quietly as I explained what we'd found. "There's no direct threat," he said carefully, "but I'll file a report. And Ethan, if you see anything else, anything at all, you call us immediately." Then he paused. "I wasn't supposed to tell you this, but Claudia Monroe was released 3 weeks ago, early parole for good behavior. She's supposed to be in Tillamook County under supervised release. But, well, let's just say I've learned not to take anything at face value when it comes to her." My blood ran cold. 3 weeks ago, that was around the same time Amanda, a friend of ours and one of the first to join our original resistance, had mentioned seeing a woman standing in the woods across the lake during the community picnic. "She looked familiar," Amanda had said then, brushing it off. "But I figured it was just a neighbor." Now I wasn't so sure. That week, we reinforced every camera on the property. I upgraded our system with motion-sensitive spotlights, solar battery backups, and hidden trail cams in the surrounding woods. Lena updated the community newsletter with a reminder: report any unknown visitors, no matter how harmless they seemed. Then, it happened again. Not a flyer this time. A postcard. Arrived through the mail. No return address. Postmarked from Las Vegas. The front featured a picture of a desert sunset, cliché and generic. On the back, handwritten in careful cursive: "Still creating magical lakeside experiences. Desert venues now available. Cactus gardens. Sunset ceremonies. VR." Lena read it twice before speaking. "VR," she whispered. "Claudia Monroe. Her initials." She looked up at me. "She's not done." I sat back in my chair, heart pounding, not out of fear, but fury. She was playing games again. Not directly threatening us, just reminding us she still existed. Still watching. Still circling like a vulture, waiting for something to die. For weeks, we debated what to do. Should we go public with the fact that she might be back? Report her to her parole officer? Tell the community? But it wasn't just about us anymore. We had built something beautiful here. Real connections. A place of healing. The last thing I wanted was to let Claudia reclaim space in our lives or our neighbors' minds. Still, we had to be smart. I set up new encrypted backups for our security footage and data. Lena installed geofencing alerts on our phones, so if someone stepped within 20 feet of the cabin's perimeter while we were away, we'd know. Then came the third message. This time, it wasn't subtle. A text message from a new number, sent at 1:34 a.m. This isn't over. Some battles are won in courtrooms, others in shadows. Sleep well, Lucas. Lucas. My name's Ethan. The name was wrong, but only by one letter. A slip? Or a clue? We traced the number. Burner phone. Untraceable. Officer Martinez filed another report, but there was still nothing actionable. No direct threat. No crime committed. Legally, he said, she's walking the line. Morally, she's crossing it with a grin. Lena and I talked late into that night. I hate that she still gets in your head, she said, curling up beside me. That she still takes your peace. She doesn't, I replied quietly. Not really, because here's what I knew. Claudia might still be watching. She might lurk in the woods or scribble creepy notes from cheap motels. But this cabin wasn't hers to haunt anymore. She could play all the mind games she wanted, but the people she once manipulated had grown wise. We had a system, a community, a family. And me? I wasn't the grieving grandson hiding from a barbecue anymore. I was the guy who built something from ashes. And even if the ghost came knocking again this time, I'd be ready to answer the door. 2 years after the barbecue war and the strange return of shadows, life settled into something better than normal. The cabin was no longer just a sanctuary, it was home. Not a home to hide in, but one to grow in. Lena and I got married the following spring, just as we'd planned, in Grandma Emily's wildflower garden beneath a hand-built arch wrapped in white wisteria. The porch swing was freshly stained. The deck had been rebuilt stronger, wider. And our guest list was made up not of vendors or clients or community outreach directors, but real people. Harper, Derek, Mrs. Peterson, the Johnsons, the Millers, even Officer Martinez off duty, holding a plate of ribs with a beer in hand. We named our daughter Rose Emily Walker, born exactly 1 year later, in the room that overlooked the lake, the same room where my grandmother once taught me bird calls and how to count stars. I sat with Rose in my lap one golden afternoon, rocking gently on the porch, watching sunlight flicker on the water. She cooed at the wind like it was a friend. Lena snapped a photo from the door and smiled. She's going to know every inch of this place, Lena said. Every inch, I nodded. But not every scar. Because some things we'd already healed. After Claudia's strange messages stopped, I never heard from her again. No more flyers, no more postcards, no more cryptic threats wrapped in poetic nonsense. Her supervised release ended quietly, and, according to her parole officer, whom I contacted just once out of cautious curiosity, she had found work in a legitimate real estate firm across the state line. Still detached from reality in some ways, the officer said, but she hasn't crossed any more lines. At least, not the legal kind. That was good enough for me, because by then, we weren't afraid of her anymore. What Claudia never understood was that the power she thought she held, the manipulation, the intimidation, the game board she believed she controlled was never real. The moment we stopped believing in the illusion, she lost everything. And I gained something far more powerful than revenge. I gained roots. Our 4th annual Silver Pine Lake Community Day was our biggest yet. Over 200 people from across the county showed up. Local vendors donated snacks. A high school jazz band played on the floating dock. Lena captured candid portraits, barefoot in the grass with Rose strapped to her chest. As I stood on a picnic table to deliver my now traditional speech, I looked out over the smiling faces, faces that once belonged to strangers but now lived in our phones, our inboxes, our stories. 2 years ago, I began. Someone tried to take this place and sell it back to us, one fantasy at a time. They tried to convince us that connection could be manufactured, that ownership could be forged, and that legacy was just another prop to be rearranged. I paused, searching for the words Grandma might have whispered had she been standing beside me. But my grandmother, Emily, taught me something when I was very young, I continued. She said, character isn't what you do when people are watching. It's what you do when no one ever will. And that truth, that quiet, persistent truth, it has its own gravity. It pulls us back to each other. The crowd clapped softly. A few nodded. Mrs. Peterson wiped her eyes. Later that night, as the stars came out and fireflies danced near the trees, I sat alone by the lake's edge with a mug of coffee and my thoughts. A warm breeze rustled the cattails. And I thought about legacy, not just the kind that lives in deeds or documents, but the kind that survives in memories, values, decisions. In children being taught to protect what matters. In strangers turned neighbors, turned friends. My grandmother never raised her voice. She never led a protest or filed a lawsuit. She never installed a security camera or built an app. But she taught me how to love something enough to fight for it. She taught me to see through the noise. And in the end, that's what saved the cabin, not the tech, not the paperwork, not even the justice system. It was the truth that no one could counterfeit. Claudia had spent her life scripting moments, designing scenery, dictating narratives. She sold magic, not realizing that magic doesn't come from control, it comes from presence. A real community isn't something you build to sell, it's something you protect because it matters. Sometimes, when Lena and I walked along the lake at dusk, we'd see tourists stopping to take photos of the flowers or ask about Community Day. And sometimes they'd ask if we were the couple from the HOA story. And I'd smile and nod. Because yes, we were. But more importantly, we were the next chapter of it. And one night, just before the end of summer, something unexpected happened. I found a letter in our mailbox. No name, no return address. Just one sheet of thick paper, typed and folded with precision. Ethan, this is not a threat. This is not a confession. This is acknowledgement. You stopped me before I caused more damage, before I lost myself entirely. I still believe I was doing something good, helping people feel like they belonged. But I see now, I was forcing the illusion. You built the real thing. I see that now, and I hope one day I can too. No signature, no initials, just a single final line. You won't hear from me again. That's my gift to the lake. I read it twice. And then, instead of burning it or storing it away as evidence, I tucked it beneath a photo of Grandma Emily I kept on my desk. Right next to the old ceramic birdhouse she painted with me in third grade. Because some ghosts don't come back to haunt. Some come back just to say goodbye. At its heart, this story is not just about a cabin, a fraudulent HOA, or a return threat. It is about what we choose to protect and how we do it when the systems around us fail or falter. Ethan's journey, from a grieving grandson to a community leader, reveals a truth often overlooked in loud, reactive times. That quiet resistance rooted in integrity, connection, and authenticity can outlast even the most calculated manipulation. Claudia Monroe tried to manufacture community. She attempted to repackage nostalgia, connection, and legacy into a product she could sell. But what she never understood is this: real belonging cannot be bought, coerced, or branded. It is grown slowly, imperfectly in the spaces between people who show up for each other when it matters most. The story teaches us that you don't need to raise your voice to make a stand. You need to be consistent. You need to know who you are, what you value, and why it matters. The strength that built Ethan's resistance wasn't aggression, it was love for his grandmother's memory, trust in his community, and the clarity to separate illusion from truth. It also shows us the long arc of justice is not always found in courtrooms. Sometimes it shows up in the silence of someone walking away, acknowledging defeat not with violence, but with absence. Claudia's final note wasn't redemption, but it was recognition, and that too is a form of closure. Lastly, the story invites us to redefine legacy. It's not about what we leave behind in material form, it's about the values we imprint through how we live, what we protect, and who we uplift. Emily's legacy wasn't her cabin, it was her quiet courage, passed down to her grandson, who transformed grief into belonging. In a world obsessed with visibility, noise, and control, this story reminds us that true power lies in presence, in showing up for what's real, and in building something too rooted to be shaken by storms or shadows.